Let's start with the big idea itself. What if we just started throwing all of our trash into volcanoes? It sounds like something out of a cartoon or a wild science fiction movie, but it's a question people have seriously asked. On the surface, it kind of makes sense. Volcanoes are basically giant natural furnaces. When they erupt, they release heat that can reach over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt rock, so it feels like they could definitely melt some of our everyday waste, right? The world has a massive trash problem. Every single year, we produce more than 2 billion tons of solid waste. A lot of that ends up in landfills, where it just sits and slowly breaks down. If it ever breaks down at all, some of it ends up in our rivers and oceans, harming wildlife and poisoning water. So the idea of a super hot volcano burning it all away might sound like a perfect solution. Just dump the trash in and let nature take care of the rest. But even before we get into the risks or the science, there are some obvious challenges. First, volcanoes aren't everywhere. In fact, most of them are located in remote or dangerous places. The idea of loading up trucks or planes full of garbage and hauling them across the country or even across the world to reach an active volcano is already a logistical nightmare, not to mention the cost and the pollution caused by moving all that trash in the first place. Then there's the problem of getting close enough to a volcano. Active volcanoes aren't exactly stable or safe. Just being near one, even when it's not erupting, comes with risks like toxic gas, sudden lava flows, earthquakes, or landslides. Most waste disposal systems today are built to be safe and manageable. Trying to throw bags of garbage into a boiling pit of lava is neither of those things. Even if we could get the trash there, how do we actually get it in? Just tossing it from a distance wouldn't work, and getting close enough could be deadly. And here's another thing to consider. Not all volcanoes are the same. Some have open lava lakes like the ones in Hawaii, but those are rare. Most volcanoes only have visible lava during or right before an eruption. So even if we picked the right volcano, there's a good chance we'd be sitting around waiting for the lava to show up. And trying to time our garbage drop with an eruption would be dangerous and probably impossible to control. So before we even touch on the science of whether or not it would work, the basic logistics already show some pretty serious roadblocks. It's an idea that gets attention because it sounds extreme and powerful, but just getting the trash to the volcano and getting it in would be an expensive, dangerous, and very unpredictable process. In the next part, we'll look more closely at what would actually happen to our trash in a volcano and whether it would even burn the way people think. Now let's imagine that somehow we did manage to get all our trash to an active volcano and safely dumped it into the lava. What would actually happen to it? Would it just melt away instantly and disappear? The answer isn't as simple as you might think. When something falls into lava, it doesn't always burn up right away. Lava is extremely hot, usually somewhere between 1,300 and 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's also thick and dense. It flows more like syrup than water. That means solid objects like metal, plastic, or large bags of trash might just sit on top of it for a while instead of sinking or melting immediately. Some items would catch fire, sure, but others might not even fully break down. Another thing to think about is what happens to the smoke and gases released when trash burns. A lot of everyday items, especially plastics and electronics, release toxic fumes when they're set on fire. These include chemicals like dioxins, furans, and heavy metals, which are dangerous to both the environment and human health. If we started burning tons of garbage in volcanoes, we'd be pumping even more pollution into the air, except now it would be coming out of a volcanic crater. Scientists have studied volcanic gases and found that they already release carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and other harmful substances during eruptions. Adding household or industrial waste into that mix could make it even worse. It could affect air quality for miles around, especially for people living near the volcano. And unlike a controlled waste incineration plant, volcanoes have no filters or scrubbers to catch the bad stuff. Everything just goes straight into the sky. There's also the question of whether all trash would even break down under those conditions. Materials like glass and certain metals require extremely high temperatures to melt. Some parts might survive the heat or only partially melt, leaving chunks of waste behind in the lava or on the volcano's surface. And that's not even counting hazardous waste, which could react unpredictably under those extreme temperatures. And then there's the simple fact that volcanoes don't erupt on command. Lava isn't always available, so unless we're lucky enough to have an open lava lake, we'd be stuck with huge piles of trash waiting for the next eruption. That could take years or even centuries. In some places, a volcano might stay quiet for hundreds of years before it erupts again. So while the heat of a volcano sounds powerful enough to destroy anything, the reality is messier. Some of the trash might burn. Some might just sit there. Some could release dangerous chemicals, and some might never melt at all. In the next part, we'll look at places where this idea has actually been studied in the real world, and what scientists found when they tried to explore it. Even though tossing trash into volcanoes sounds wild, this idea has actually been looked at in a few places around the world, not just as a fantasy, but as a serious research topic. One of the most well-known cases is in Iceland, where scientists have studied how geothermal and volcanic energy might be used to manage waste. Instead of throwing trash straight into lava, they explored ways to use the natural heat from underground volcanic systems to help break down waste in a more controlled setting. In Iceland, some research teams looked into using geothermal vents, those super hot steam pockets underground, to process organic waste like food scraps and plant material. The idea was to create a waste-to-energy system by capturing the heat and turning it into electricity, or using it directly to decompose certain types of waste. It wasn't about dumping garbage into volcanoes, but more about working with volcanic heat in a smarter and safer way. Other volcanic regions like Hawaii and parts of Italy have also looked at similar concepts, but none of these ideas involve actually feeding trash into open craters. It turns out the dangers and unknowns are just too high. For example, one concern is what happens if foreign materials like plastic or metal interact with molten rock. These things could cause unpredictable chemical reactions, including explosions, especially if certain gases are released. There's also the question of logistics. Most of the world's waste isn't produced anywhere near volcanoes. Cities like New York, Tokyo, or London produce thousands of tons of garbage every single day, but they're nowhere near active volcanoes. That means we'd have to ship massive amounts of waste across oceans or borders just to reach a volcano. And that's not only expensive, but also terrible for the environment. Transporting trash by boat or plane releases more greenhouse gases, which defeats the whole point of trying to clean things up in the first place. In addition to the cost and environmental impact, there are safety concerns too. Volcanoes are unpredictable. Some may look calm for years, then suddenly erupt without warning. The idea of setting up a waste disposal system around something so unstable doesn't exactly sound like a smart move. And even if we found a constantly active lava lake, we'd need to build roads, containers, and equipment to dump the trash without putting workers or nearby communities in danger. There's also the question of how locals and governments would feel about turning a natural wonder into a giant trash pit. Volcanoes are often sacred in certain cultures or protected as part of national parks. Turning them into dump sites wouldn't just be dangerous, it could also spark huge social and political backlash. And so while the science of using volcanic heat in a safe, controlled way might hold promise, the idea of straight up tossing garbage into active lava is way more complicated. In the final part, we'll break down what we've learned and talk about what this idea really says about our struggle with trash and how we think about solutions. Now that we've looked at the science, logistics, and real-world attempts, it's pretty clear that throwing our trash into volcanoes isn't the magic fix it might seem like at first. Still, the fact that this idea even comes up shows just how desperate people are to find new ways to handle the massive amount of waste we create every single day. What this concept really highlights is how we keep looking for big, dramatic solutions instead of dealing with the root of the problem, how much we produce and how little we reuse. Even if volcanoes could somehow burn up all our garbage, it wouldn't stop the constant stream of new waste being created. Plastic packaging, food waste, electronics, it's all still being made faster than we can deal with it. That's a deeper issue that volcanoes can't solve, and while using extreme heat from volcanoes sounds powerful, it doesn't erase the risks. Burning waste, no matter where it happens, can still release harmful gases into the air. If we're talking about plastics, chemicals, or electronics, the fumes and byproducts can be dangerous to both people and the planet. It's not just about getting rid of garbage, it's about what happens to that garbage when we do. There's also something symbolic about wanting to throw our waste into a volcano. It's like we're trying to bury the problem instead of facing it. Just dumping it out of sight doesn't make it go away. In fact, it often creates new problems, whether it's toxic emissions, transportation pollution, or environmental damage. Instead of trying to destroy our waste in the most extreme way possible, a more practical path might be reducing how much we create in the first place. Recycling, composting, reusing materials. These methods may not be flashy, but they work. And unlike volcanoes, they don't carry the risk of explosions lava burns, or air contamination. So, while the idea of using volcanoes as giant trash incinerators might sound exciting, it's not a real solution. It's more of a reminder that we need to think smarter about how we live, what we consume, and how we take care of the earth. We already have the tools to make a difference. It just takes the will to use them. Thanks for sticking with this crazy idea. Let us know what wild solutions you've thought about when it comes to the trash problem.